Good Saturday to everybody. Thanks for clicking on to the Tropical Outlook for the 24th of August. I will get there in the end. Before we continue with the video, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It would be greatly appreciated. Tomorrow there will be a live stream at the unconventional time of 7:30 p.m. The reason for that is because I'm going to be travelling to Northern Ireland early tomorrow morning. And there will be, believe it or not, even though I'm traveling here and there and everywhere at the moment, it feels like, but there will be a live stream tomorrow afternoon, or evening, should I say. So I hope you can join me for that. There will be a link in the description below today's video for that tomorrow. So, tropics. No tropical activity expected, according to the National Hurricane Centre, over the next 7 days. And you're asking yourself the question, Marky Boy, why are we not seeing any tropical activity, given how hyped up, in a sense, a lot of this season has been? Because we thought we were going to get 25, 30, a million hurricanes this year. Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but all the ingredients looked as if it was coming together. I still think September is going to be a busy month, and potentially October is going to be a busy month. But it has been quieter than I think many folks have thought. And the reason for that is several-fold. Sea surface temperature profile of the Atlantic, the displacement of warmer than average waters further north, the potentially further north high pressure belt, the further north intertropical convergence zone, the fact that the Saharan dust continues to come off Africa into the Atlantic basin. Normally the Saharan dust season would be pretty much over by now, long gone, in fact. And we have got, obviously, ample fuel within the Atlantic basin itself. We've got record-breaking sea surface temperatures. We've got record ocean heat content. The Gulf of Mexico is waiting to get tapped. We've got sea surface temperatures of 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 32 Celsius. Everything appears to be coming together, but there is aspects that is not so much. And I'm going to try and break that down as much as I possibly can. So here we go. First and foremost, we have an unfavourable Madden-Julian oscillation here. We have got sinking over the Americas, the East Pacific. We have seen activity in the East Pacific, actually. But nonetheless, we have got the suppression over the Western Atlantic Basin. But with time, as you can see in this graphic, the greens represent rising air, the oranges represent sinking air. With time, as we progress through the month of September, you see these greens pushing eastwards from the maritime continent towards the Atlantic basin. And I think that is going to be one favourable aspect going forward. Now, another aspect is the Intertropical Convergence Zone. What is that? It is the area where the winds from the north converge with winds from the south. As you progress through the heart of the northern summer, that area of convergence goes further north. And what has essentially been happening is that band of thunderstorm activity moving from east to west, because we've got cooler air to the south, hotter air over the Sahara, and we've got winds blowing from east to west. These African waves develop over the Ethiopian highlands, and they ride a jet stream, in fact, actually over the African continent, known as the African Easterly Jet. And what has happened, I think, over recent times, this is an interesting tweet here by Giuliano, I think that is how you pronounce it, talking about how much of Eastern Europe, including the Balkans, has experienced probably the warmest summer on record. This was also due to an anomalous monsoon activity over the central eastern Sahel, which kept the intertropical convergence zone and very hot air masses well north than normal. The blue line on the left here shows that. So you can see here, this is the normal line, and you typically find towards the middle portions of August here. So we're just around the peak now where the ITCZ is at its furthest north. Normally it would be here, but in fact it's further north. You can see that here with the blue line showing where it's actually positioned compared to climatology. So that is one very interesting aspect to consider, is the fact that the ITCZ has been north of the Cape Verde as opposed to south of the Cape Verde Islands. And when you've got this convection generally running kind of west-northwest over the African continent, and these waves are exiting further north than where they originated over the continent, they're actually moving into Saharan dust. That is one aspect, but another aspect is cooler than conducive waters for tropical systems. So essentially, the water temperatures are below 27 Celsius, and therefore it's not conducive. But you can see here, this is showing the dry air. This is a graphic here by Matt Devitt, showing that why the tropics are so quiet in combination with several things coming together at the same time. So one aspect, I think, is actually the heat, believe it or not, over Eastern Europe that is pulling the area of convection, the Intertropical Convergence zone, further north into the Sahel than what you would typically see. Normally, you would see it down closer to the tropics, 15 degrees north of the equator. It's actually closer, more between the Cape Verde and actually the Canary Islands. And you've got a cold ocean current that runs down the west side of Africa. So the sea surface temperatures are not overly conducive. So that is one aspect here. Let me see. So you can see here at the moment, there's actually very little in the way of convection here because of the dry air. Here's the Cape Verde Islands. Here's the Canaries. We've had waves coming off Africa too far north. And if you look at the sea surface temperature profile here over the eastern side of the Atlantic Basin, so if we get to the right chart, it would help. North Atlantic, here we go. So these African waves are essentially coming off and in over 23, 24 Celsius waters, rather than over the 27, 28 Celsius waters between the African mainland and Cape Verde. This is generally where you would normally have these waves coming off. But because they're coming off further north, between the Cape Verde and the Canaries, these water temperatures are essentially, in combination with the dry air, is essentially suppressing activity over the central main development region of the tropical Atlantic here. So I've got a couple of notes here that I want to make sure that I'm covering everything here. So that's one aspect. ITC too far north, probably induced by the heat wave across Europe. Another aspect to take into consideration is the core of warmest waters compared to average. That's another aspect to take into consideration. Not only does this potentially help pull the mean ridge further north, actually causing shear in the atmosphere over the subtropical and tropical Atlantic, but it's distorting the wind flow pattern over the Atlantic Basin. Another aspect to consider is the fact that we've actually had increased wind shear, despite the fact that El Nino is gone, La Nina is trying to develop. The slow nature of the developing La Nina is actually meaning that we're seeing more of an Atlantic El Nino coupling. So in other words, we've got strong winds in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere blowing out of the west over the tropical Atlantic. Normally within a La Nina, you reduce that by due to this temperature profile between tropical Atlantic and tropical Pacific. But because the La Nina has been quite slow in developing, the atmosphere is essentially, the SOI is almost showing more of an El Nino rather than La Nina base state. So therefore, we're actually seeing shear over the tropical Atlantic in combination with the further north ITCZ and the dusty air over the Atlantic. So there's multiple aspects down to the reason why the tropics are quiet at this moment in time. We've also had the mean ridge of high pressure centered further north than typically you would expect, and that has been a trend in recent years. With the warming trend, the subtropical belt appears to, in the last decade or so, shifted further north, and that is a subject that I want to cover in the weeks ahead with regards to heat records in the UK and Europe as well, increasing, likely due to the further north progression of the tropical ridge. So I hope that is essentially explaining a little bit. You've got the slow development of La Nina, the atmosphere not responding, and essentially creating more shear than you would typically expect with developing La Nina. You've got the distortion of the sea surface temperature profile further north, pulling the ridge further north. And this has all been having a negative impact in terms of tropical cyclone development. But like I've said, we are likely to see change taking place going forward. As we see the Mont-Julian Oscillation currently over the Indian Ocean and the maritime continent, sinking over the Americas and the West Atlantic here, you can see that as we progress forward, those greens representing rising air will start to progress into the Atlantic Basin mid to late September. Up until then, it looks as if we may have to wait. There's a stall frontal system off the east coast of America, draped across Florida, extending into the Gulf of Mexico. There may be a possible spin-up as we progress through the first few days of September, but this is quite nicely shown up in the GFS, mean sea level pressure, and also the 700 to 300 millibar relative humidity within the atmosphere. You're seeing a lot of dry air, a heck of a lot of dry air. The core of the ridge at the moment here was centered over the eastern side of the Atlantic Basin here. Lots of shear. You notice here there's moisture over the Canary Islands. So there again is this distortion, moisture in areas that shouldn't be. And you've got this kind of distortion of the humidity temperature profile of the atmosphere as well as the oceans. And you can see generally the reasons behind the lack of activity overall. So as we play through this sequence, you can see that we have got the remnants of Ernesto moving into the UK here. We've got this corridor of convection extending from that frontal system off the east coast of the United States up past Newfoundland, all the way across the Atlantic and into the UK here. And we've got a heck of a lot of dry, dusty air getting driven south out of the Azores, Spain, Portugal, down into the eastern side of the Atlantic Basin, and essentially just choking things off. Played through the loop here, not a whole lot of moisture. We do have some moisture. We've got a little bit more humidity and wave action coming off the African continent here. We've got some over the north of South America associated with the monsoon trough. Got a little bit through the Caribbean and the southern Gulf of Mexico here, but not a whole lot to speak about. Notice this stall frontal system continuing to stick around. What we need to do is we need to watch out, because some of the models have been seeing some sort of a spin developing here on the tail end of that frontal boundary. But you notice here not an awful lot of change going forward, but looking towards the very, very end of the month, it looks as if we are starting to moisten things up. We're starting to see a little bit of a better profile within the atmosphere between north and south, between the ITCZ and the subtropical ridge. And with time, we will start to see potential development as that MJO rotates eastwards over the Pacific towards the Atlantic Basin. So this is something that we need to keep an eye on as we go forward here. Looking at the GFS ensemble, and let's have a look at the mean sea level pressure anomalies here and show what it is indicating here. So just bear with me a little. Let's have a look at the Vortmax chart here. This is something that should be of interest. We've got an updated model, so we'll have to go back in time slightly here. So you can see here as we play through the loop, there's that area of high pressure within the subtropical Atlantic. Not a lot to talk about here, if you notice. Not much in the way of spin all the way out to Saturday the 31st of August. If you notice here, there's literally nothing showing up, which is pretty incredible. Play into the first days of September. Again, not a whole lot showing up. We have got a little bit of twist and turning to the north of the islands here as we move towards the end of week 1 of September. But you notice not an awful lot going on. At the very end of the loop here, you notice here September 8th, we've got a couple of little closed circulations here starting to show up. We've got a couple of waves running off Africa here. This would suggest to me that the ensemble is trying to sniff out something. And this would coincide with the MJO moving into the Atlantic Basin going forward here. But generally speaking, over the next week to 10 days, not a whole lot to talk about. We'll need to keep an eye on the tail end of that front extending into the Gulf of Mexico. But generally, we have got exceptionally warm sea surface temperatures within the Gulf, 31, 32 Celsius. We've got the highest levels of ocean heat content over the Caribbean, extending into the Gulf of Mexico that essentially we've ever had. And I think the lack of ever had, I say that in recorded history, I think the lack of tropical activity within the Western MDR, extending into the Caribbean and extending into the Gulf of Mexico, has allowed these sea surface temperatures to continue to warm up. The concern is, as we move into the month of September, with the ingredients coming together, that we have got incredible fuel to tap, and we need to watch out for some very big systems going into the month of September, particularly mid and late September, I think, will be the time to watch. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Do tune in to the 7:30 p.m. live stream tomorrow. It would be great to see you. And if you haven't already done so, hit that subscribe button. Much appreciated. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Bye for now.